Okay, so we've started. So I'm Audrey. I am going to start practicing interviewing authors. It is something that I kind of did when I was in the military, doing interviews, and I really actually enjoyed it. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Well, I am Nick Betts. I am the favorite Canadian fantasy author probably know nothing about. Well, you definitely know me, but anybody looking out there probably doesn't. I just get out of a 13-year career in the military not too long ago, and I missed it so much that I wanted to come back as a civilian. So, still working as a flat-faced civvy, as we call them, for the Department of National Defense up here. And then basically, yeah. And outside of my work hours, I spend it right here in front of the computer, writing my life away. And to this day, I don't know how I write as fast as I do.
So whenever you transitioned out, I know a lot of people, whenever they transition out of the military, end up doing DoD, like Department of Defense contracting, because you do it for 12 years. It's
Mhm.
hard to transition to civilian life because you go so long with having your left and right defined for you. Going into civilian life is just it's uh it's really shocking, actually. It's definitely a culture shock.
Yeah, so I wanted to pick up, or I guess have a soft landing, so to say. So
Hmm.
when I left the military, I literally left the military on a Friday, walked into my new job on a Monday. And the job I took was with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police up here.
Oh,
So
okay.
not the same as the military, but at least they have a good
Hmm.
solid rank structure. You understand where you fit. You understand like the chain of command and all that. So a little bit of a leg up. I come in as the executive assistant to who was then now retired, the second highest ranking RCMP officer here in Alberta, where I'm at. Um, and it was an interesting transition, only from going from like the Wild West style military out here in Alberta to the RCMP. Mind you, policing is a little more serious. It's a little more corporate.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate to find people that were either children of veterans or a few veterans that had left the military and joined the RCMP. So it was nice to actually have people that could talk the same talk in the same language. Because when I'd be taught stuff at the RCMP, I'd mumble to myself in something, and then whoever's teaching me is like, "What the heck are you talking about, why?" And anyway, it'd be just me basically trying to translate what they taught me into 13 years in the CAF, and
Hmm.
eventually, like, I mean, I was only out for 10 months, and then I got a call back from my old major, my old captain, and they said, "Hey, you want to come back as our finance officer?" I said, "Yeah." Well, I said, I know absolutely nothing about finance, but yes, 100%. I don't have to come in
Please.
downtown anymore. And I was like, well, I did my whole career in administration.
Okay.
I blew stuff up for 2 years, but I don't really look at that with a fond light. Um,
Oh, I mean, all of the EOD guys I know, uh, they liked it.
yeah, like I know it's like it was going through that course was probably the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
Hmm.
Um, and to do that as a 20-year-old who's just left mom and dad's only 8 or 9 months before was just super difficult.
Yeah.
Um, and it was shortly after I graduated from that course that I realized I was like, I don't want to do this. So the first chance I had, I pulled pin and I went and became an admin clerk. And I did that for the next, well, almost 12 years ish. So
At some point, you transitioned, though, right? You were Army and Navy. So which side were you doing what for?
yeah, so we have up here, like we call them purple trades.
Okay.
Because it's basically if you're into logistics, I'll just use my own trade for an example as a clerk. Um, you're able to work for the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force,
Hmm.
just without being in any single discipline. Like over my 13 years, I went to the field. I did the Army thing. I did disaster relief.
Hmm.
I sailed with the Navy for 2 years on frigates, and our last destroyer, I was part of the decommissioning crew for that. So that was super cool.
Oh, that's
Um,
actually super cool. Yeah.
yeah, it was the Athabascan. So it was the fourth and the last to be paid off. Um, of our destroyers from, I believe the Athabee was laid down in 1972. Um, which, I mean, unfortunately for us here in Canada, we've had to stretch out our assets for a lot longer than they should be. And well, the Athabascan, just to keep it going and finish our sailing schedule, they literally did a port side engine swap of both engines, just to keep the thing
Ah.
going for another 8 months. Um, and so we finished that, and then I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'll get a little bit of time in the shore office, chill out a bit. And
Mhm.
anyway, then I ended up I made a deal with the devil. In that sense, was I was asked by our MOC advisor, so career manager. I don't know if you guys had something similar down there.
You,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, it's really just somebody that's kind of like at the top of your trade in rank, and they're the ones that post people everywhere and put people into positions, and really they're just like the movers of a chessboard. So
Right. I know what you're
anyway,
talking about.
yeah, so I took a 7 month sailing schedule. I was away. Oh geez, I want to say probably 4.5 to 5 months out of that seven.
Mhm.
And anyway, there was a clerk who had just come back from what we call Operation Reassurance, which was over in the Mediterranean, all like sailing up into the Black Sea by Russia and everything before stuff went haywire.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, it was so I took her spot on the HMCS Montreal, um, sailed again for 5 out of 7 months. I was home, like I was away for a
It's
month. I was
rough.
home for 2 days. I was away for a month and a half. I was
Mm.
home for 8, and then gone again to Europe for 3.
Whenever
Um,
you guys are on, when you're on your deployments, when you're on ship
mhm.
like that,
Yep.
um, do you guys make port along the way, or are you guys out there the entire time?
No, no, we're definitely into port for sure.
Okay.
Like I think the longest stint I probably ever stayed at sea was 19 days.
That's
We were
still too long. I hate
well,
being
I
on the
mean, like,
ocean.
yeah, it's quite a bit. I mean, especially like when you take in all of the factors that make it kind of suck sometimes. So like
Mhm.
after 4 days, you're out of yogurt. After 7 days, you're out of pretty well fresh vegetables. So you're
Mhm.
eating like the McCain frozen blend. And I mean, the cooks do their best. Like, I mean, the Navy cooks we had were some of the best I had my entire career. Um, but yeah, it was 19 days we were off. It's kind of like my cool military story, which came from the Navy, but it was like we were out doing an exercise off of, I want to say the UK.
Mhm.
We were part of a NATO fleet. There were 14 ships in our contingent. Um, and what ended up happening was we were pulled off of the exercise we were doing. We were supposed to go into port. I don't know if it was Portsmouth. I can't remember just because it was canceled and we basically pivoted so fast.
Mhm.
And we stayed out at sea, I think 5 or 6 days longer than we were supposed to. Because what had happened is they had reported a Russian submarine in the area that was kind of watching what
Oh.
we were doing. Because
Mhm.
our purpose for the exercise was to go up to northern Norway, which is where we were making our way, and we were supposed to fire missiles inland, into just a target range up there.
Oh, right.
We were the first Canadian ship to fire missiles, and I forget however long it was, but super cool to be a part of that experience. Um, and anyway, we got pulled. We got sent under. Basically, we call it the Canadian Joint Ops Command, which is
Mhm.
our deployed unit. Um, and basically, we were sent to track this submarine down, to find it, to monitor it, just to figure out what it was doing. Anyway, after about 4 days, um, I'm given to understand. I mean, I wasn't in the ops room at all, but I'm
Mhm.
given to understand that we were the only ship to track this thing. And then we put out our sonar, right, just wide of the ship, and we
Mhm.
pinged the thing for about 2 days. Now, I mean, I've been down on 3 deck, 4 deck, and I've been sleeping, and of course you can hear the sonar, especially when we were down by Bermuda in the Caribbean,
Mhm.
um, and it's like decently loud. So I can't
Yeah.
imagine how it is for the guys in the submarine getting pinged when the sound has nowhere to escape.
I never even considered that. I was thinking like Oh, the whales. But
Yeah,
yeah, the guys in the that would be so
it
that'd be
was,
so scary. That'd be so scary. One, to be you, but also to be them because
yeah,
those ships are huge.
100%. And that's it was the last day. I want to say day 6. And
And you
anyway,
guys
what
got them.
well,
Oh.
we had found them a couple days before, and we were on them more or less,
Mm-hmm.
which was interesting because we were the oldest ship in our fleet by decades, and we were the only one to find them out there with like all of the early Burks and stuff like that. And like nobody could find this thing. And yeah, the Athabascan from 1972 tracked it down. Uh, of all, like no modern capability or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just blood, sweat, and tears. I'm sure from the ops room. I didn't know any different in the ship's office, but um, and so anyway, the last day that we had tracked this thing, I remember sitting in the galley having breakfast at, I want to say it was around 10 after 7.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and anyway, over the Shincom comes like they were piping the image tech up to the bridge. Like, oh, that's interesting at 7 in the morning, but okay, sure, whatever. See you, Dan. Have fun. And anyway, come to find out that we didn't realize for probably the next 3 or 4 minutes until the general alarm started going off. They put us to action stations because the Russian sub had actually surfaced about 400 yards off our port quarter.
Oh.
So what ended up happening? They wanted the image tech because um, they'd come up, they had taken pictures of us, we were taking pictures of them,
Mm-hmm.
and then that went on for probably a half hour, 40 minutes. And then what ended up happening was the Russian sub dove, and it dove too deep, and we never found it again. It was just it went out of sonar range, and then
Mm-hmm.
our it was originally thought we were going to stay at sea because we had just missed our other port visit in which we were all going to be disappointed. It was Dublin, Ireland. Um, yeah. So, but anyway, it was all good. We had a guardian angel saint up in the VIP suite next to the captain that said, "No, we're going into Dublin." So we got 2 days in Ireland, which was great.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
then yeah, that was probably like my favorite few months in the military. It was the longest I was away. Like I was fortunate to never have to deploy for months and months and months on end
Mm-hmm.
until I hit the Navy. Um, but yeah, it was probably that 3 month stretch when we left Halifax and we went into Europe and saw our first, like we were in Brest, we did Edinburgh and Glasgow, Scotland, Antwerp, Belgium. We were in Bergen, Norway. Um, I was hoping to get the off the night that we were in Stavanger after we fired the missiles, but I got put on duty that night, so I get to watch everybody else leave the ship.
Dang.
Yeah,
Ah.
and then they gave us the choice when we were heading on the way back because our last port was supposed to be in Reykjavik in Iceland, which was going to be super cool.
Mm-hmm.
But they gave us the choice. They said like, "Oh, do you guys want to stop in Reykjavik, or do you just want to go straight through and head on to St. John's, Newfoundland?" And anyway, so we just said, "Yeah, like we'll go to St. John's, we'll spend the night, we'll clear customs, and then we're
Mm-hmm.
home to Halifax in 2 days."
Right.
So
I mean, when
yes,
you're out that long, it's
mm-hmm.
hard because like seeing home, seeing that finish line being there, it would have to be really cool to
Oh,
like keep you from being home. So I
well, the
get
worst.
that.
Oh, totally. And I mean, like, family and being away in that long is one thing, but at the same time, like you're a sea corporal. You're out there. You've been to 7 ports in 2.5 months. You're broke. Because that's
Mm-hmm.
the biggest thing is like every port you go to, it's well, we'll take a trip down to the pay office and we'll get a few shekels and we'll go ashore. And the worst, the worst port I was ever in, at least for priciness,
Mm-hmm.
was oh geez, Hamilton, Bermuda. So there's a reason why when people go to Bermuda, they go to all inclusives because we had a
Uh,
couple. I was on duty the first night we get into Hamilton. We had 3 guys from our deck department, some of the bosuns, go across the road. And anyway, one burger, a thing of fries, and a beer, $40 US. So the
Not
Canadian
worth it.
dollar
I
is
bet it was
not.
trash too.
Chances are, yeah. So we didn't stay long in Hamilton. We
Mm-hmm.
had to. I think we were only there 2 days. In the morning of the third, the captain actually piped all hands to the flight deck. So anyway, we're up there and just whatever you can scrape together for clothes because we're like, oh, we're probably painting. Um, and anyway, what ended up happening was he had said, now we have two options. He said, we can turn this around really quick and we can leave tonight. And what's going to happen, we're going to
We
pass in
want that
between.
option.
Well, so it wasn't even just like, we're like, oh yeah, like let's go home. Like we were broke 2 days ago when we got into port. But what ended up happening was like out in the mid-Atlantic, there were two storms converging right in our path home.
Oh.
So between the captain and our Met techs, the weather guys, they basically said if we leave tonight, we can clear the two storms before they converge.
Mm-hmm.
But if we leave tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, like we were originally supposed to, we're going to be sailing back to Halifax and it's basically batten down the hatches the whole way. So we're like, yeah, no, like we're going tonight. Like this ain't happening.
Yeah.
Like, and that would have been a horrible experience.
Yeah.
And I
I
know
mean,
I'm
you
going
were
off on
already
it.
on a ship. That's already like the worst experience in my heart. My parents had a sailboat. This is like the closest I ever got to sailing.
Yeah.
And I spent the whole time on Dramamine, asleep or throwing up over the side of the boat. So the idea of even being on a ship for that long is my worst nightmare. I would rather die. I would jump overboard, I think.
Yeah. You definitely like, you learn how to take gravel and get into a good regimen. Like, I mean, I used to start, oh geez, like 2 days before I'd even go to sea. I'd be taking like the big 12-hour ones. And then you get to see, and you're taking the 12-hour ones 3 times a day, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then anyway, then you get into tapering off after a bit. But I got a rude awakening my first night ever at sea. We left the safety of Halifax Harbor. It was
Hmm.
a little bit choppy then. Like we were probably into 2 to 3 meter swells.
No,
Um,
I'm out.
and then no, I'm not there yet.
Ugh, it gets
Um,
okay.
oh yeah. So this, remind you, this is my first night.
Continue.
This is my first night at sea ever.
Hmm.
Um, we start coming around Chebucto Head. That's basically the far mouth of the harbor, just before you come out into the open ocean, and we
Hmm.
start hitting 4 to 5s, and then 4 to 5s go up to 5 to 7s, and then 6 to 9s, and then by the time we're out in the open ocean, we're in 9 to 11s.
Do they give you, okay, so serious question. I am sure you are not the only person who's taking this Dramamine and stuff or ginger pills or the little pressure point things, whatever the tricks are. Um, do they give you a transition period to be like, hey, we know that some of you guys are going to be messed up to get like basically like, get your sea legs? Or is it like you're running and going day one,
Oh no,
throw up
you're
through it, boot?
yep, and that's basically it. It's like
Mm.
you're gonna learn today, boy. And that's really what it was. Like it was they had closed up for what we call flying stations, which was we were bringing the helicopter on board,
Mhm.
and I just remember I was like, they're like, oh, you gotta like remain in place, and I'm like, no, I gotta go to the heads, like right across the flats from where we were at, and my goodness, I was wrapped around that toilet for about 45 minutes.
Damn.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
damn.
hanging on for dear life. And anyway, I vaguely remember, and mind you, some of it is also secondhand. I remember being drug up to sick bay, and being pinned against a wall so I didn't fall over by one of the boarding party guys. And anyway, I finally got
Mhm.
in to see the doc. And anyway, the doc, there was three things that she could do for you. So there was either you had the oral Gravol, just bear with me 1 second, get in to see the doc, and there's three things she
Mhm.
can do for you. So one is oral Gravol. Uh, the second one, if you can't keep the oral Gravol down, is a suppository. And that, which I mean makes sense.
Yeah.
And then if you're in such a state that you need something more powerful, like I did that night, I
Mhm.
actually got a Gravol injection.
Oh,
So
I
I
didn't even know
don't.
you could inject it like that.
Yeah. So like I'm sure it's not gravel. I'm sure it's something else.
Yeah,
Um,
same thing.
yeah. Oh yeah. But that was so we ended up. I ended up getting my gravel shot. I remember getting into bed, but I don't remember like the trip down from sick bay. And then I
Hmm.
didn't move out of my bed for like 24 hours. I I stayed there and tried to ride it out as best I could. And then what you call it? And then I had my boss come down, and anyway, he's like, "Yeah, you gotta go up, you gotta check in with the doc at sick bay." I was like, "I can't move, man. Like I can't, I'm."
You're gonna have to drag me.
So the one line, and this is kind of the funny part of the whole thing. Mason, who was the guy that was kind of pinning me against the wall and got me to and from. Mason said that there was one line I used, and I told the doc when she was putting the needle in my arm. I said, "Send me back to the field. I'll never complain again." And that was my first night ever at sea.
Mm. Oh,
So
I thank you for your service. I
yeah,
I would have
yeah.
jumped overboard immediately. You're like, I ran to the head. I would have ran off the edge.
I
You
did
can't be AWOL if
everything.
you're dead. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I did everything I could over the next 2 years to get off of those ships. And so that was where I finally saw I was like, okay, I can cut my time by a year or two short if I take a deal with this master warrant officer. And anyway, I
Hmm.
did, and he lived up to it, and that's how I got my nice my that was then my favorite posting to 406 Squadron with the Air Force. So that was super
Hmm.
cool, and it was a far cry from the Army that I did for 2.5 years and gave me depression, and it was a far cry from the Navy that made me the sickest I've ever been. So I was
Hmm.
happy and fortunate to be blue for a little while.
That you know what? Even down here, it's like, um, if anybody like all of the armed forces here make fun of the Air Force. We call them the chair force and all of this stuff. But if anybody asks you, it's like, oh, hey, which branch of the military should I join? It's always the Air Force. Go the Air Force. The quality of life is like up here. So,
Yeah, and your pension's no different. Your benefits are
yep.
no different. Like
Hmm.
join the
You have
Air
much,
Force.
and you have much less trauma. Much less trauma.
Oh, 100%. Like I mean, I wish like I wish somebody had took me in the beginning and said, if you sign that thing and it says Army, like you need to be beat with a rubber hose.
Dumb. You're
Because
dumb.
yeah, 100%.
I was just over 5 years in the army, so I don't, trauma. Woo.
And I mean that's what it is. Like I mean, a lot of people can ask like, oh, what did you get out of your military career? Like, did you get lots of medals? Did you get lots of money? I'm like, I got crippling depression and anxiety, and I'm sure
Hmm.
undiagnosed PTSD. And that's not from like having rockets and stuff fired at me. That's from the people.
Oh yeah, like they know what they're doing. They don't care about you as an individual. You're a product of the army, and they're going to use you in a certain way. And you have to inflict a certain amount of trauma on a soldier for them to be able to operate in the sorts of environments that they're going to operate in. I feel like the army, the military in general, is getting better about talking to soldiers and trying like, how are you feeling? We're not going to send you back to back to back deployments anymore. We're going to take your TBI seriously. All of this stuff, like they're trying to shift the culture, but even still, there's only so much you can shift when, like, the core of it is not people first, it's mission first, right?
Yeah, and I know one of our chiefs of the defense staff back when we were in the early days of the mission in Afghanistan was General Rick Hillier, and Rick Hillier always used to have a saying, "Mission first, people always." So Uncle Rick always used to look out for the troops back then, and um, to hear the guys who served in Afghanistan under Rick Hillier talk about him as the chief of the defense staff. It's like, yeah, you that's one guy you wish you could copy and paste for
Mm.
the rest of time, more or less. My leadership course back in 2020, um, we heard from our section commander. He was a sergeant, and anyway, he
Mhm.
had a saying that was, the military can't modernize until the dinosaurs go extinct. And so basically you've got
Mhm.
the younger generation of non-coms and junior officers that will eventually wash the old breed away, really. And the
Yeah.
military will begin to modernize. Like I don't agree with everything we're doing, but like I think there's a time and a place for it, especially in effectively for us now, what is the peacetime military?
Yeah.
Because if we ever go back to war fighting or combat, then yes, then you have to dial it in so much more, and
Yeah.
that's where you get the trauma and you get the highly instilled discipline. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, now it's just we're into ultimately coming into a different breed of soldier, um, at least from what I'm seeing, anyway, from where I sit.
Yeah.
I mean, we've watched it happen, but the one thing we still can't shake um, is definitely the stigma around mental health. Um,
Mhm.
I talked to quite a few junior soldiers and listened to them tell the story of they're having issues that I mean present as depression, anxiety, PTSD, whatever you want to call it. Um, but they're almost encouraged not to seek help
Mhm.
because if they do, then it's almost threatened that it'll be a detriment to their career.
Yeah.
So I work in a building right now where we hold what's known as the boards of inquiry. Now, boards of inquiry are convened every time there's a service death, um,
Mhm.
and that's usually the ones in garrison. So, having been here in Edmonton since 2020, like it would probably take all the fingers on my two hands, and that's how many like guys have unalived themselves over the years. Um, which unfortunately is sad. And every time we see the BOI leave the building, it seems like they're back a week or two later because somebody else has followed the guy before them, and
Mhm.
it makes me wonder if they do have those issues with their chains of command, or if it's one of those things you just get in too deep and you can't ask for help or you don't know where to start. We have a great program up here that's known as the Sentinel program.
Mhm.
Um, so basically, it's a training course that troops can go on for. I want to say it's 3 or 4 days. I could be wrong. Could be less. Could be more. But it basically, rather than needing our troops to engage a chaplain right away, you can engage a sentinel, and the sentinel can help direct you to the employee assistance program. They can help guide you to base mental health services, or if need be, and often they're roped into it anyway, is the unit chaplain. So
Mhm.
uh, there are those avenues. They're just not well spoken about,
Yeah.
and I really wish they were, um, because I've encouraged a lot of troops, even in my capacity now as a civvy, um,
Mhm.
to go and engage mental health. Like if you're having issues in the service, go get that documented. I was in and out
Yes.
of mental health services, I want to say 4 or 5 times. Now I believe the system failed me a little bit, um, because I remember even going one of my early days when I struggled in the army. Um, I went to try and get some sessions and talk through it, like I did with psychologists in my teens.
Mhm.
And the social worker that was there gave me breathing exercises, and I was like, "Oh, this is not what I came here for." And this is
Mhm.
when we were just wrapping up Afghanistan, so there was still a lot of the age-old suffer in silence.
Mhm.
And basically, that's what happened. I left mental health, and I continued to spiral, and then it's just re-entering crisis every so often because depression has its own circadian rhythm.
Mhm.
Um,
Yep.
and anyway, it was just so then I get out. Um, I I got out in September of 22. I did my first meet and greet was with my family doctor that my wife was going to in December. And in March, I asked for him to run me through testing for depression and anxiety. And I told him I was open to SSRIs.
Mm-hmm.
And within 15 minutes, I had a depression. I had a depressive diagnosis. I had an anxiety diagnosis, and I had a prescription for Prozac in my hand. And I stood in front of the pharmacist counter.
I don't
And
mean to laugh. I'm sorry. It's just I relate to this. I
yep,
understand.
100%. And so my family doctor, listening to me, accomplished what the military couldn't in 13 years. In 15 minutes, he did that. Like, I had my diagnosis. Like, I fought with an MO one time to the point of me almost getting kicked out of the CDU. Basically just trying to say, like, I need you to run me through this. Like, this is an issue. And it
Mm-hmm.
was basically, I just got the whole, like, oh, you need to man up. And I'm like, come on. Like, I need you. And of course, then you ask, you're like, oh, can I see somebody else? No. Like, I
Mm.
know what your issue is. And it's like, oh, do you? Lovely. Um,
I
so
wonder
now,
how many of those people like talk to troops and then troops end up unaliving themselves. I wonder how they even sleep at night because they're like, oh, maybe I could have prevented that. I wonder if they even think about that or if they just,
well,
it's just a non issue for them because that's insane that you
yeah,
would go into a field. I have feelings about this that you would go into a field with so many people that are like presented with these stressors and there's going to be a higher rate of these things to not listen to troops. Anyway.
yeah. And then, I mean, like, there's your whole chain of command that makes it worse. And I could pinpoint the starting of my depressive disorder diagnosis to a warrant officer that I had in my first couple years before I switched into being a clerk,
Mhm.
and continually made things worse. I became the whipping boy for a lot of stuff. And I mean, like, I look back at it now and I'm thinking, like, man, I was a kid and I was kind of like asking for help, like, show me a little bit of stuff. Like, um, I can't just go figure this out on my own because it's just too much of a culture shock.
Yeah.
And for the next 2.5 years, my life was just absolutely miserable, because of this one person. So I had jokingly asked when I was talking to Veterans Affairs, um, back just after Christmas. I had asked the guy who told me about my award, for my depression, that the military finally recognized it. My big hope was for them to do it, so I would get my psychology sessions covered for the rest of my life.
Oh,
That was the
okay.
big thing I wanted.
Mhm.
Now it came with a sizable cash award as well.
Ooh,
And
love that for you.
I had asked jokingly, I was like, okay, so can we go, like, rather than the taxpayers foot the bill? I was like, can we go get the money directly from the problem? The guy from VAC had a good laugh with me and he's like, no, we can't do that. But I did get to do one beautiful thing, which was, subconsciously, and this is kind of where my fantasy segue will happen, is that I didn't realize until after I was done writing at one of my events. I was sitting and I was reading one of my books because I don't just like to stand there and look at people. And I try to, like, make it a little bit of a performance. So I'll exaggerate some of my reading to make it look exciting. And yeah, there it is. It's so
This.
pretty.
So, this is a perfect. So, you're sitting here reading, trying to lure people in by reading your own book. My question is I have a few of them and I've asked zero of them, just so you know.
It's all good.
We got derailed with the military talk, but I love it. Yeah, it's just it's hard to not get derailed by it because I don't know in life, there are so many veterans, but when you start talking about stuff, it's hard to stop
Mhm.
because
Oh,
of it
totally.
being your life for so long. But relevant question,
Hmm.
with the military, and you were talking about this, is your experiences and stuff, since we've been talking so much about your experiences and your job and your transitions and your PTSD, how have those things shaped your like your author bias. So whenever you're writing, you've gone through all of these things that shape your authorial voice and the way that you would problem solve whenever you get your characters into sticky situations. Your author bias would be like um, different than, you know, Dave's. Dave's never been on a boat for that long or been in the army, so the way that he approaches problem solving is going to be different than you do. So how is that shaped, especially in your Fates of Athens series?
Yeah, so I'll backpedal just for a second, so I can tie up the just the one thing from before, just because I got away from
Yeah.
myself too.
Sorry. Yeah, of
So
course.
no, it's one of those, like, it's interesting. Like, how do I deal with my military problems through my writing, or how does my military experience creep in? So yeah, I was at
Hmm.
this event, I was reading, and anyway, it had dawned on me. I was like, oh my god, like Alira's story. I was like, this is the first couple years of my military career. Like, this is when you're in there, you go in eager, you get the piss knocked out of you, and then it's just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna be disgruntled, and that's just gonna be the way I'm gonna serve out the rest of my career. Well, anyway, I also didn't realize that subconsciously, this oh well, the main villain, I guess we could say, in book one, Rygar. Rygar shared a lot of traits, and a lot of what Zara experienced with him in their arc of the story. That was my warrant officer, and that was
Mm,
the me feeling betrayed. And no matter what, like, Zara was hell bent, like, no, he's gonna suffer. He's gonna, like, pay for what he's done. And
mhm,
the last thing he sees before she unalives him is basically her finally cracking and basically giving in to her darkness and her depression. There's a secret poison that kind of works within her to aid in that. But
mhm,
it took Zara's mind breaking before it finally got through. And so it was kind of, that was like my, what I had envisioned it as, of like, okay, if I'm going to run you over with a bus, like, you are going to see me in absolute rage beforehand. Um,
mhm.
and anyway, that's, so it kind of like, it bled in that way. And anyway, it's kind of just like, I thought to myself after I was done, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat, like how it all worked in and wove itself. And anyway, I was like, you know what? I was like, you can't do it in real life because it's very frowned upon, but you can do it in a book. So
Mhm.
anyway, I was like, you know what? I didn't intend it that way, but now I see it, and I was like, now it's beautiful. I love it. Um, Now in
Do
terms of author,
you
no, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry.
No,
I
go,
was
go
just gonna
ahead.
ask if it felt um like cathartic. Once you realized what it was you were processing, do you think about it and be like, that's I needed that. I needed that to I wouldn't say move on because it's not something that you just easily move on from, but
Yeah.
something that you keep that gives you a little bit of power back in that situation where you really didn't have any.
No, and that's really it, right? It's kind of that reclamation, and it's like, you know what, life doesn't play out this way. I like, if I had, like, a lot of people, I mean, if you're given wishes by a genie, it's money, it's fame, it's whatever. Um, like, I just wish I could take this stuff out of my head. I wish I could take everything that happened out of my past. And like, I do look back and I'm like, okay, well, if I had have gone a different route, if I had have stayed in university and didn't leave for the military, like, how differently would things have played out? Do I think I had depression beforehand? Uh, it's possible. I don't know. I had what a psychologist called once was a transition disorder. That was when I was
Mm,
going from high school to university and a lot of stuff was changing. I have a really hard time with that. Like, I thrive on routine, and that's kind of where I'm
mhm.
waiting for my test for ASD.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna say
and
that's classic autism, my guy.
and
I
that's like, and that's the thing. Like, my wife had asked me. She's going through her master's in counseling psychology right now. So
Mhm.
she had asked me, like, oh, you should, like, she told me, like, Sheldon Cooper, like, oh, you should go get tested. And anyway, so I took it seriously because, like, once I started doing a few quizzes and questions, I was like, you know what? Like, I think there's a little bit of a foundation here. Like,
Yeah.
there's plausibility. Um, and so I'm just awaiting testing now because it takes a very long time with our socialized healthcare up here. Sometimes
Yeah.
there's just long waiting lists and not enough providers. So even if it comes back and they're like, you know what, like, we don't think you have it, then at least I have that to go on. And I'm like, okay, like, because I think to myself all the time, I'm like, why do I think a certain way? And why do I do the things we like I do? And like that's just kind of one thing I can look at to try and get answers for.
Mhm.
So, and I mean, I'll do what I can for it, right? So,
I think everything that you just said are things that I exactly said to myself as I was going through and getting my autism diagnosis. Um, a lot of I do better when I know what my role is. That's why so many people, so many autistic people are drawn to the military. It's schedule. There's no guesswork, none of that stuff. Transitions are easy because you're told exactly where to be, what time to be there, all of those things. Um, I went through the why do I think like this? Why do I always feel like I'm outside? Why do I feel like when I'm with people, I'm different people? Like I always describe myself as a chameleon, not realizing that that's masking. So all of those things, like I said, all of those things you just said are things that I told myself. And then when I went to my diagnosis thing where they give you the questionnaire and all the stuff, like the next day she was like, oh yeah, you got it. I was like, oh, thank you. Oh, I'm so relieved because now I can actually claim my own. Been a professional who's diagnosed me, so now I don't feel like I'm taking up space in this community um, falsely, you know.
no, I totally get that one. And that's kind of like Kathleen, that's my wife, Kathleen, asked me, she's like, well, what do you do if it comes back and like you don't have it? And I was like, well, then I continue to try and seek answers. Because I mean,
Hmm.
really, I told her, I said, I ask myself all the time, like, why aren't I normal? I mean, normal is very subjective, but at the
Hmm.
same time, like I see and I'm very observant to the way other people go about their lives and things and the way that they act and interact and stuff. And I'm like, man, I am so far removed from the way everybody else is that I just wonder. I'm like, there has to be an answer. Um, and it's not just introversion. It's not just depression. I was like, there's got to be
Hmm.
something. And my reason for seeking it out is just to try and get answers and then to figure out like, okay, how can I use that knowledge and use that diagnosis to figure out a better way to live my life that kind of interweaves with like where I'd love to be and what I'd love to do. And
Hmm.
just right now, I find it's been such a struggle and just trying to figure that kind of stuff out. Um, but I could go on and on forever about that.
Sorry,
I
me
I no
too.
no it's all good. That's the which
We
call it.
need like a 12, we actually need like a 12-part podcast to get through all of these things because I feel like we have a lot of stuff in common.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And that's the so I guess I'll go back to my author bias and
Okay.
I'll try to high step it a little bit. But anyway, I just think like from the beginning, and I'm still planning on doing for WWP a little bit of a military series and how to flush out more accurate feeling military in your writing.
Hmm.
Um, Now it's getting into and it's having the knowledge about the chain of command and how rank relationships work and the different people that make the machine move. Because I mean, a lot of people will forget logistics. That's
Hmm.
probably the biggest thing. Mind you, in classic fantasy, it looks a lot different than modern military.
Right.
But the way that I have things worked out, like you begin to understand the command pyramid of, you've got, at least in my small kingdom, starting out in that book one, you've got a general and a commander, and so I've mixed army and navy ranks because that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then you've got your majors as your company commanders, and then your captains and your lieutenants. And I was like, and then of course there's back in the old day, it would have just been the sergeants and then the enlisted. And I've even got
Mhm.
in there, and I never seen it in a fantasy book because a lot of people forget the rank and how crucial it is. But I actually have a named sergeant major in book one. So a
Mhm.
lot of people, like, you just, if you're not in, you don't know. Like,
Right.
you hear the term, and I mean, unless, like, I don't know, maybe you watch Generation Kill or something and you know what a sergeant major is, but outside of that, and then you learn different things like logistics, pay, lots of different stuff. You learn the passage of orders. One of the things I try to flush out is the number one concept that's taught in NATO, the concept of mission command, where orders are given in such a way that, as the youngest private, you know the intent of at least your junior commander, your lieutenant, and then even above that, you know the major. So you know up to that level.
Mhm.
So basically, it's like, if you go on mission and your sergeant gets killed or the lieutenant gets killed, well, you can still carry on with said mission because you know what you're supposed to be doing, at
Mhm.
least down to that lowest level. And it's the enabling of junior members um, to act, rather than just to not look like, I don't know, like run around like headless chickens.
Right.
Um,
If you go through all this training, that's I remember as well, going through, and it's like at any given moment from the top down, if
yep.
it makes it down to you, you got to be able to pull the mission. You have to be able to keep people safe, continue the mission, whatever
Mhm.
that looks like, you know?
And
So
that,
I think that that's probably, I agree, something that maybe civilians don't think about because why would you?
yeah. And that's like, I mean, you can get into the old officer and enlisted method of things. Like, that's why, um, not to poke at it, but that's why Russia has had such a failure in the Ukraine, because they lack an NCO corps. So you've got
Mm,
your enlisted and your officers. Well, if the officers kaput, well, the guys don't know what's going on, and that's why they have no idea, and that's their biggest failure, is just they miss that critical component. But I would say too, like, on top of that, there's other things you've got to keep in mind. So, um, especially with fantasy, is you've got to understand that depending on what your character is, what their role is on the battlefield, um, you are behind everything or you are on the front line, and you
hmm
can only act with what you can see. So if you are a frontline soldier and you are fighting sword to sword with the person in front of you, forget about what's going on the right flank or the left flank or even behind you. You're focused on the one person in front of you, and that's that. If you are the general or the commanding officer at the back of your force, well, you're going to see what's going on, and it's not just as simple as, oh, I need to swing the right flank around. No, you've got to send people. Word has to be passed. You need people to kind of to form up to actually carry on the movement. And there's all these things that have to happen. Um, and keeping in mind too, you need to know what kind of force you're up against. Are you up against ragtag guerrillas? Are you up against
mm,
a modern conventional army, or at least a conventional army of the time, who is experienced, who is standing, who is paid, um, and who should ultimately have a superior fighting force to yours? Um, Now, the one thing that drives me ballistic, and this is kind of where I pick on Star Wars a little bit, is seeing people who are incredibly undermanned, under resourced, somehow winning every single time by the power of friendship. Like, the one thing that, like, you begin to realize is that, like, if we go into a fight, I know for Canadian doctrine, if an enemy suspected strength is 100, we go in there with 300. We always go in 3-1.
mhm.
Now, looks different. And in terms of what I try to show, I know it slows things down just a tiny bit. But I'm a tactics nerd. So I like to, and I did in the first book, I give you the briefing session. I show you what happens. I show you how you can go in, like where people sit, what everybody's role is in relation to the commander, the one who's giving the briefing. I've got your key players are right at the table. Everybody else is backbenching and just watching and listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to give you like, okay, we're gonna do this. Suspected strength is this, so this is how we're gonna form up. We don't usually do this, but we're gonna split here and here. We've got an attaché. Okay, cool. You're gonna be the center vanguard. We're gonna basically put you in front of everybody else to prevent cavalry. And then really, it's just trying to figure that stuff out. So a lot of people will say like, oh, there's some heavier military stuff in there, but I'm like, well, like it's simple tactics, and I'm just trying to show you that you don't just show up on a battlefield and run at one another. There's like, and that again, that's the to go back to NATO doctrine. Unless you've served, and even up into leadership ranks, you don't know about the 16 steps of battle procedure. You don't know about everything that happens before you actually get to the fighting.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's one of those like to be prepared for kind of what happens in the swift changes, and to really understand that war is not just fought on a two-dimensional plane. It is three-dimensional. It is above. It is under you. And especially in those battles, like you're not just going sword to sword. You're going to have arrows flying. Depending on what period you're covering, you're going to have trebuchets and catapults and all these things that are going on and changing stuff. So you really learn to think of your battles and whatnot from that three-dimensional perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And to learn that, okay, so you're making an advance on the right. Well, naturally, the enemy should turn their artillery to counteract that advance, in which case you might have planned to move up on the left just as everything rotates and move fast. So it's just I think another level of tactical thinking. And
Mm-hmm.
it's funny.
How do you balance that? Okay, so let's
Yeah,
talk
go for it.
about the books that are out right now. So I know that in these books you have some moments where people are in larger scale battles, and you are drawing attention to front of the line fighting, right? And I haven't seen a whole lot of back of the line fighting. How do you balance knowing what you know about tactics and presenting it to readers in a way that them knowing nothing about tactics, that it's palatable for them, so they're getting like that true experience of what it would be like to be on the front lines, um, in a tactical situation, but also in a way that they can process it and they can understand, because they don't have all of that background information that you have already, that you're just like, it's already on your software. You're already immediately processing all of these things. How are you presenting that to your readers?
Yeah, and that's kind of so one of the bigger things I would say is that you have to make it palatable. So we can't get
Hmm.
into like too much military jargon. And mind you, the stuff that we would have used in um, the modern conventional fighting era is not what they would have used on horseback and footpad and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Now, you have to go in, and I, at least this is a personal belief, you've got to have at least a modicum of belief that the reader is somewhat intelligent, and can figure out your right and left flank, can at least look up the term vanguard or rear guard, basically knows where archers would be stationed. Because I would like to think if we're reading fantasy, we've at least seen, I don't know, Braveheart, maybe. So you've at least got an idea of how these things kind of shape up and formations. Now, there's a lot of having to steer away. So, like when you're giving tactical stuff, it's like, okay, well, I can't tell people that our mission is to deny XYZ, blah, blah, blah. I've got to tell them, oh, okay, we're going to go here so that they don't get access to this pass or whatever. Like to try and
Hmm.
put it into more or less layman's terms. Um, and then once it gets into the fighting, I don't usually do a lot of I don't usually do a lot of background action. It's usually
Mhm.
stuff that's right in front, because that's just the leadership style I like better. I like lead from the
Mhm.
front rather than lead from the back. So that's usually where I position my characters. That's kind of what I get into with that. But really, I think it's just keep things simple. Um, One thing that was interesting, having read one review of my first book, it basically said, "Oh, like the battle kind of like jumps around a bit, and it's a little bit choppy." And I said, "Well, like that's how I intended to write it, because thinking from a frontline soldier who is in the midst of everybody else and is squaring off against an enemy, it is like you'll have people bump into you, you'll take a swing at
Mhm.
somebody, you might take one off the pauldron, like it's just you got to think about where you're at, and then at the same time within the big opening battle of book one, or sorry, the follow-on battle of book one, um, I get into a little bit of frontline stuff, with a little bit of background command. So I show the relationships between your commanding officer and your subordinate commanders, in the passage of information, being able to pull units and redirect them into different areas, and to weigh the risk of, can I really spare these 50 people when our line's collapsing and send them to a different spot that needs it? To see all of that happen in real time.
Mhm.
And that's where I get into it. Some people might think it might slow down a little bit, or it might seem choppy, but I try to give that true experience of, I've never been in combat. I've only been in simunition ranges. But it's one of those, like, what it's realizing what it's like to go into the black and to not be able to make those decisions, especially as different for them than us, wearing 100 pounds of armor and trying to swing a
Mhm.
sword, and do it for an hour, 20 minutes, however long it may be, and just to understand the scope of the battlefield. So my advice to anybody that was writing battles is draw the thing out. Like literally, like you're playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons, draw it out on a piece of paper, draw out your
Oh,
projected.
draw it out. I was
Yeah,
like, draw
yeah.
it out. I thought we were just talking about maybe slowing it down too much. You want them to draw it out more? No,
No,
literally,
no, no.
pen and paper, draw it out. Okay, I'm with you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, no, definitely not slow it down. No.
I was like,
Um, but
that's
no, definitely
interesting
like
advice.
grab a paper and draw it out.
Mhm.
Even if you just want to get into, I don't know, you're in a city or whatever, and you want to get into one-on-one combat. Like, what does your what does your city look like, or at least the area you're fighting in? Are you just fighting in an open square, like
Mhm.
Lyra and Tiora in book two? Are you fighting on a massive open plain? Are you fighting in a narrow alley where you're not going to be able to take a full swing of your sword? So you might have to like either go to something smaller or go hand to hand. So there's just thinking about all those little factors that kind of roll in and roll out from your military experience that really bleed into your writing. But I think the
Mhm.
one thing, that I really wanted to do, and it's leaning forward to book five, the very end, is I wanted to kind of show the overall effect of war, because it's often it's misconstrued as life and death,
Mhm.
when in fact, quite often, very few of the people who participate actually die, but there are usually those who suffer more, that survive. And that's kind of where I came in with that quote that I have for the dedication, to those who
Mhm.
went to war and were basically left behind, and those who came home and are never the same. Um, there's often a bigger follow on effect that I find you don't see, going from thing to thing, and just how it grates on people, over time. So you might have your hardened veterans who have been through it, the guys that can take a life and move on. But
Yeah.
if you're doing it for the first time, you're going to have quite the shock. Um, and to realize that, and what I tried to give you with Alira in book one, um, is to show the effect of trying to fight. Mind you, she was under a goddess's influence who pushed her well beyond her limits. But it's to realize that you are, for the first time, fighting in full armor. You haven't
Hmm.
really trained. You're trying to swing a sword. So you've got to realize that, like, you can't go in there and fight like you're Ray Palpatine in The Force
Hmm.
Awakens. You can't do that. Your arm is going to be sore. It's going to be heavy. You're going to be tired, and you're gonna be clumsy. You're going to make mistakes. I just think, to kind of sum up that point, that it works its way into your writing in really every aspect, not only the fighting, but the way certain characters interact with each other, especially in command relationships.
Hmm.
Um, and that really, we to make it accessible, we kind of have to just get away from our military jargon and just try and put it
Yeah.
into terms that the average person can understand.
Okay. I think that that's really great advice for anybody who is a veteran writing fantasy. Stay away from an overuse of jargon and acronyms, and put things into a term that is accessible to almost everybody. And then at the same time, I love the advice that you gave to just fantasy authors in general who might not know tactics. Draw it out. Don't draw it out. Draw it out. I thought that that was brilliant. Um, I will definitely, as I work with authors in the future and they have battle scenes, I am definitely going to be giving them that advice. So,
Well, and that's it. You take into account where you're at, and really, it's easiest if you just draw the area out, because you can describe it in prose. You can have the idea in your head, but even to
mhm,
look at it and to see how it moves, like, because I mean, one on one, you might have a more dynamic battle. Whereas if you're group against group fighting in the streets, you might be pretty static. Um, but just in terms of, like I said, just space considerations, where you're at, and how people could realistically move. Like, if you're on a wide open plane, like on a basic tactical level, okay, we're going to get into some flanking. We're going to try and extend our line out to wheel around the back of everybody else. But yeah, I won't speak too much more on that one, because yeah, I could
sorry.
just because again, tactics nerd, I could just go on forever.
I was locked in as soon as we started talking about military stuff. I was like, all right, lock in, Audrey. It's go time.
So
I think that kind of pulls me like right to where I need to actually cut off for the night.
no worries.